Everyone, after that frivolity, we love that. So our global theme for December is pain. It was chosen by our, the VEEF chapter? Oh, I'm so sorry. And illustrated by Marta Koshenlinska, what a wicked name that is. So, ouch, that hurts. Pain is a warning and a lesson. It teaches us what we should avoid and just how much we can bear. Muscles grow stronger after exercise tears the tiny fibres of muscle cells, and the body repairs those damaged fibres. We know that physical wounds can heal with time and proper care, but we often ignore the fact that emotional pain can too. If you need a little relief from whatever pain you're carrying, talk to someone, make something, or help someone else in need. Pain can point the way to growth. It's very true, I think. So, as always, we'd like to thank our sponsor, who are Creative Collective, bringing Cardiff Capital Region's creative and media industries together to connect, develop and grow. Right, enough from me. I'm really, really, really excited to welcome our speaker for this month. So, hi Delphi. So Delphi Campbell is a self-proclaimed crippled, mad and queer artist with a multidisciplinary practice based in Cardiff. Her work explores everything pink, fleshy and soft, and she views it all as self-portraiture, delivered in a humorous yet tender manner. Delphi first moved here to study fine art at Cardiff Met and moved back in 2021 after finishing her Masters at the Ruskin to resume her exhibiting practice. Alongside her artistic practice, Delphi is a director of Cowley Community Closet and a lover of all things secondhand, and I have to say looks incredible today. Best dressed. So, thank you so much, Delphi. We're so lucky to have you.
Thank you for having me. Well, that was a better introduction than the one I had written down. So hello, my name is Delphi Campbell. As Amina mentioned, I did my undergrad in fine art here at Cardiff School of Art and Design, which is a part of Cardiff Metropolitan University. Then I shifted to Oxford to do my Masters at Ruskin and moved back here to resume my exhibiting practice. I have a myriad of physical and mental health conditions and disabilities, but I'm not going to bore you with the entire list. I do experience chronic pain and neuropathic pain as a result of these. It's a symptom of several of my conditions and has been a routine part of my adult life. I started my medical journey when I was around 19, so I didn't grow up with disabled. I was undiagnosed and unaware for several years before I was, but I didn't grow up disabled. I was able-bodied, if slightly awkward, child. And I also started uni when I was 19. It was all happening the same year. I was beginning to dip my toes into the art world. I had real dedicated time to make art for the first time. And since I was 19, I've been getting new diagnoses more or less every year. So my practice has always been revolved around myself. It sounds very self-centered. It's always been rooted in self-portraiture and illustrating the facets that make up myself. And because all of this was happening at the same time that I was going to uni, it was a very natural movement into making artwork about disability and consequently for me, making artwork about pain. In addition to moving across mediums, my art also shifts between the abstract and the figurative. My references can come from scans, medical journals, or even random scribbles in my notes app. Currently on the screen are 2 frames from a pelvic MRI I had done last year. And on the right frame, you can see marked out a lemon-sized lump of endometriosis attached to my uterus. Endometriosis is one of my conditions, and it affects 1 in 10 people with a uterus. It's surprisingly common, but very underdiagnosed, and the average wait time for a diagnosis is between 7 and 9 years. On the left, you can see the wall sculpture that I made out of that scan, or one frame of it anyway. The background is painted, and the foreground of the growths themselves are three-dimensional endometriomas that I stitched together using scraps from my studio. My pain, these growths, my endometriosis were dismissed by doctors as mere period pain, as me being a dramatic woman, and I even dismissed it in my own mind as a result of internalized ableism and misogyny. I convinced myself that it couldn't be so significant as it was. It took me 10 years of telling doctors that I couldn't function before I had that scan, and subsequently my diagnosis. The painting on the right is called My Body is a Temple and focuses on the structures of the digestive system, or more specifically, the textures and the structures of a human stomach. The top right is a model of a human stomach, and underneath that is a rendering of the microscopic villi which line the stomach surface. My work is very concerned with the body and the flesh, which I'm sure you'll notice. And for me, that is a natural extension of the vested interest you have to have in your body when you become chronically ill. You have to become acutely aware of your body. The works that I've just mentioned were exhibited in a show earlier this year, curated by Phoenix Hunt. The exhibition was at Fusion Arts in Oxford, and it featured work centering women's pain and their experience with the medical industry. You can see the collection of objects that I showed here. Each of them relates in some way to my pain and to my medical journey, and they were also displayed at my eye level, which is a mere 46 inches, give or take, as a wheelchair user, compared with the average or prescribed 57-inch eye level, which prevails in White Cube galleries. This picture shows how it was lit for the duration of the exhibition, and you can see a little more clearly my uterus lamp, which was the other work I showed. I made this while I was waiting for my endometriosis diagnosis. I knew that something was wrong. I knew that it had to do with my uterus and my period, but exact answers evaded me and my doctors. It felt like there was a hazard light on for my body, but no manual to tell me what the light was for or why it was on. There are lots of other ways I've displayed my uterus lamp. I usually like to sling the cable over something or have it dangling from somewhere. But as you can see, even though all of my objects are made independently, they have a relationship to each other. They're all about me, and I relate them all together. When I make exhibitions, a part of the process is playing with the space and the other elements that are in it, so that I can find the balance and the connection between the objects there. The first place I showed my uterus lamp was this installation. I made it at the Ruskin for my master's degree show, and its title is "You Can't Ride Two Horses with One Ass, Sugar Bean." For anyone who doesn't know, that is a quote from Sweet Home Alabama. And I titled it this way because I had made the bridal suite, the bridal wedding dress chair that you can see. And I was thinking about marriage inequity for disabled people, because quite frequently, if we marry or we move in with a partner, our benefits are rescinded and we lose our financial independence. Since disabled women are statistically at much higher risk for domestic abuse, including financial abuse. This is a really alarming pattern that we have prescribed. And so I made the bridal suite in this installation to discuss this. And the title refers to the fact that I can only sit in one chair. I can be a bride, or I can be an independent disabled woman sitting in my wheelchair. Viewers were invited to enter the space and squeeze the soft protrusions, stroke them, play with them, and they lined the entire space along with padding and other objects. Like all of my work, this was made entirely with second-hand and recycled materials. It's an intrinsic part of my life, and it has to extend to my practice. So I source all of my materials through charity shops, finding things on the streets, old curtains, anything that I can get my paws on, really. I refer to a lot of medical sources if I'm making work about a specific condition, and I've already touched on MRIs, but something that I'm really interested in at the moment, I've been looking at these collections of micrographs, which are photographs taken through a microscope, and these are a few that illustrate different conditions I have on a cellular level. So this one is a light micrograph through stomach tissue, showing an effect by autoimmune gastritis in pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia is an autoimmune condition that causes the cells in your stomach to attack itself, so you can't obtain nutrients properly. On the left-hand side, you can see a section through bone tissue with osteomalacia, which is otherwise known as rickets. That might be a more familiar term. And on the right-hand side, you can see a micrograph of a section through a fallopian tube, which is affected by endometriosis. I think they're really, really beautiful images. Here's another pernicious anemia one. All of these are from the ISM Science Photo Library, which is an absolutely fantastic resource for any kind of scientific documentation. But I also use surgical photos as well as materials from my own medical files. I made this model as part of a commission for the National Museum for their contemporary arts website, Kelf Ali Keed. Here you can see the 3 stages of its production, starting with the torso skin, then inserting some internal organs, and finally adding flesh. The model was used in a video I made thinking about existing in a state of flux. It was titled Flux also, and for me, I exist in flux in many ways, primarily because of my chronic illnesses, particularly because one of them is a dynamic disability. For anyone who doesn't know, a dynamic disability is one where it can fluctuate in severity, where one or more of the symptoms, like pain, can change based on certain triggers. It can just be more active over certain periods of time, and it can even happen randomly with dynamic disabilities. I was also in the midst of moving across the border again when I made this, and I was thinking a lot about the cycles of chronic illness. The work documents exactly that, the cycle of my chronic illness, the cycle of my pain. Sometimes my work doesn't have a traditional bodily form, but still hopes to evoke flesh. Other times it lands somewhere in between the abstract and the figurative. This is my piece Untitled, which you can see started with the idea of an overgrown canvas. It has a bulbous growth in one corner and it's trailing off to the side. This was one made very instinctively. When I'm in the studio with my accrued materials, I have a tendency to make things that relate to what I'm thinking about. It's pretty common. When I was making this, I was thinking about growths and lumps and bumps. Myself and a number of people in my family had just been scanned, and we'd discovered all these wonderful things growing inside ourselves, and it was just really on my mind. My practice these days does focus more on my physical health than my mental health, but I do still make objects about it or concerning it. One of which was, on the left, my isolation sock. So, as you can see, it is basically a black puffy helmet. So when you put it on, it effectively muffles sound and you can't see anything either. It's very, very simple, it's very crudely constructed, but it's effective for what I wanted it to do. I made it when I was really struggling with my anxiety. I was getting very overwhelmed, especially with multiple senses going on. So the helmet is just something that can kind of de-stimulate myself and bring me back to the ground. I made it as a wearable object and it dampens the environment or anything else that's causing me stress. It also responds to the human need of being compressed, which is primarily expressed by a hug. So as you can see, my work can operate on different planes. It can be a functional object, it can be visual, or more commonly, it can be experienced through touch and or sight. Oh, I recently showed Untitled, the big white puffy one, at this exhibition at Cardiff Made Summer Show, alongside my painting Zealot and the piece in the bottom corner, which is titled Offal. Offal was made as part of a triptych I designed for young Welsh artists in 2021, which is hosted at MoMA Machynlleth. It was a triptych all to do with bodily functions and fluids, offal related to digestion and excrement. The title of the triptych was Endogenous, which effectively means of the body. You can see a little bit closer up of how offal was made. It has this really beautiful kind of gummy pink PVC layer, and beneath that is a quilted patchwork sausage. And this is one of its counterparts, Eruct, which is a very glamorous puddle of vomit. Again, you can see it a little closer here. You can see the beading and the embroidery, stitch and slash. I utilised a lot of different textile techniques to build up texture, and I really wanted it to have this detailed and ornate feeling. I wanted it to be a really beautiful and rich kind of depiction. And you can see my sketchbook for my original plan or design for the rug and how it compares to the actual outcome. Part of the reason I'm so drawn to textiles and fabrics and stuffings is because they possess this kind of pillowy femininity. They're bare and fleshy, and for me, textiles, fibres, cloth, they have a comforting, nurturing, domestic nature to them. My mother taught me to sew when I was a small child, and she used to make my outfits, and it's always had a very homely connection for myself, in addition to the general perception of sewing and as domestic women's work. Something about using textiles for interactive and tactile work also really enhances the bodily connection for me, and it also has the added benefit of being experienced through multiple senses, so blind and visually impaired people can interact and experience the work as well. I have talked about work that represents pain in a more literal sense, such as growths or piles of vomits, but other times pain is marked in a different way. These works utilise a simple stitch, or even the gesture of a stitch, in paint to symbolise a moment in time. They were made in the pandemic when, as many other people, I was feeling very trapped in a circle, very in a cycle. My daily routine was monotonous and the same, and it only enhanced the monotony and the routine that I was experiencing because of chronic pain. This painting was made after a seemingly never-ending line of tests and needles, and it turns out that my fleshy blobs bruise just as much as I do. Here are some other paintings that I've made utilising the stitch detailing. And that is more or less all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here to begin with.